Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of ZFE. Today's opening bell, or how we call it in Romania, ZFE Deschiderea De Astăzi. It's Friday, it's the last day of the week, and with no surprise, we come after a all-time high here in Bucharest with the bet index touching again 28,000 points, with a good liquidity as well. But I'm keen to see how the biggest asset manager in Europe sees Romania, sees the capital markets, and its feeling right now on the markets, because we've seen a lot of volatility lately. So with us we have today NIKOLAI Petrov. NIKOLAI is a portfolio manager, emerging markets equity at Amundi. NIKOLAI, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, NIKOLAI, for taking your time. For those of you who don't know, Amundi is the biggest asset manager in Europe, and it also has a presence here in Bucharest. How's 2026 so far, NIKOLAI?
So good. The markets are volatile, so it's interesting times.
Interesting times. You're based in London, right?
Yes, correct.
Let's see. How do you see Romania? How does Romania look to you in terms of stock market attractiveness in the eyes of Amundi from London?
Well, we know that Romanian stock markets has been performing quite well over the last years, to an extent due to the pension fund systems. We know that the local pension funds have good inflows and they invest mostly locally, and the performance of the most of the Romanian stocks has been quite strong over the last years. From kind of an international investor standpoint, from the larger funds, still there is a problem of liquidity, because I would say that only a bunch of Romanian stocks, maybe like 4 to 6 stocks, have liquidity that is reasonable for larger funds, for large international investors. And yeah, the liquidity is one of the problems, and Romania is still part of the frontier, is classified as frontier in MSCI, and we know that liquidity is the main obstacle for its reclassification to emerging. But Romania is part of emerging Europe, where growth is higher than in developed Europe and valuations are still lower than in developed Europe. So Romania is an interesting market, but there are some obstacles.
NIKOLAI, how should the Romanian authorities and after all, the Bucharest Stock Exchange improve the liquidity of the market? Because we are averaging around 25-30 million euros per day, while in Warsaw we have around 300 million. So there's a big difference. And all this taken into consideration that we have a lot of appetite here in Bucharest. For instance, the most recent IPO, Electro Alpha, it had a 40% oversubscription on retail. So what should we do? Let's see, three measures in your view.
Yeah, well, there is no silver bullet for improving liquidity. And it is actually quite difficult to compare Romania specifically to Poland, because Poland economy is much bigger. They have much more listed companies. Their stock market is much more developed, and actually there are talks that MSCI may even reclassify them to the developed status at some point, not at the moment, but at some point. So it's difficult to compare with Poland. Probably more relevant comparison is with Hungary or Czech Republic, where there is also like a small bunch of large liquid stocks, and the rest of the market is quite illiquid. And valuations are probably similar to an extent. So in terms of what can Romania do, obviously it could be helpful if the government would continue both to privatize new companies, so to increase the number of listed stocks in the Romanian market, but also to maybe gradually reduce positions in the companies where it's the largest shareholder. We have seen it actually in Poland ages ago, maybe like 10 years ago or so, where the government has been gradually reducing its stakes in the largest companies, and of course it helped liquidity. From kind of a market infrastructure, settlement, custodian, it all looks decent. We don't see any issues there. Probably it could be helpful if the process of opening accounts for international investors could be eased. But again, there is no kind of a one measure or one or two measures that would change the picture completely. So normally the liquidity would be rising gradually with time as the market is becoming more and more interesting, both for international and for retail investors.
So you've mentioned, Nikolai, and that was my next question. Opening accounts for institutional access in institutional investors, foreign ones, would be eased. That would be a great or more likely a welcome measure. What else? What, for instance, what would the Bucharest stock market need in order to attract more inflows from an investor like Amundi, for instance? So first of all, liquidity, yes, these of opening accounts.
Yes, and probably if there would be more IPOs, if the Bucharest Stock Exchange would attract more companies, again, both private and state-owned companies to list, that of course would be helpful, because currently at the moment there are, again, as I mentioned, just a small number of stocks that are potentially interesting for international investors.
For instance, we have a generous, let's say, dividend yield here in Romania, and because of the fact that the stock market grew by 50% last year, this year the expectations are for a single digit, the first time in history that the average yield, dividend yield, it's one single number, 9%. How do you see the dividends here in Romania? More attractive than other parts, than Czech and Hungary?
Well, if we generally talk about valuation, not just dividend yield, but valuation overall, we can say that a couple of years ago, the Romanian market screened very well, screened quite cheap versus its peers. Now, after the strong rally over the last couple of years, it does not seem significantly cheaper than, say, markets in CEE, Poland, Czech, Hungary, but it's kind of on a similar-ish level. And still, like 9% dividend yield is a dividend yield probably higher than we can get in actually most of the markets that we are looking at.
Nikolai, let's zoom out a bit, because you mentioned our neighbors. You mentioned Hungary. How relevant is the Central and Eastern Europe region in your in Amundi portfolio allocation?
It is quite relevant. While Central Eastern Europe, Czech, Hungary, Poland represents only like 1.5% of global emerging markets benchmark, still it gives exposure to Europe, but with growth higher than in developed Europe and with valuations lower than in developed Europe. And given that we are now in the environment of diversification away from the US to Europe and to emerging markets, this region becoming kind of a more and more important.
Okay, oh, that's very nice. And on sectors, let's see, because we have a few sectors here at the Bucharest Stock Exchange. The most prominent one being, of course, energy. And I want to ask you, which sector do you currently see the most attractive for an institutional investor?
I would say that energy and banks, again, liquidity is an obstacle for some other sectors. For example, we see some attractive companies in communications and in healthcare. However, liquidity again is an obstacle. So I would say that energy and banks, these are the sectors where most international investors are looking at. in Romania.
Right now, the biggest exposure in your portfolio, in Amundi's emerging portfolio, which one is it?
As I mentioned, emerging banks. Emerging banks.
Okay. Is Romania or the Bucharest Stock Exchange large and liquid enough to matter as much as in your emerging portfolio, as much as Hungary, let's say?
I would say that it matters for regional funds, for CE funds. It's unlikely to be the core part of global emerging markets portfolios, given its size and its liquidity, though there might be some specific stocks, to enhance the portfolio.
The bread and butter of any interview, Nikolai, what would our life be without politics? So my next question is one regarding the politics, the fiscal risks. How do you see Romania in this regard, given the fact that we, for around half a year, we have a new government here, which so far is pleasing the institutional investors?
Yeah, at the moment, we are kind of cautiously optimistic on the progress of the new government in terms of fiscal tightening, and we hope for the kind of stability of the ruling coalition. Of course, the fiscal and political stability are of paramount importance to overall investment case of investing in Romania, both from fixed income and equity investors' point of view. It affects the risk premium, it affects interest rates, it affects inflation, it affects the kind of stability, or I would say predictability of the tax regime. We have seen in the past years that there were kind of quite significant swings in taxes and regulation in the most important sectors like energy, utility. So the sooner the country would be able to adjust its fiscal deficit, the less risks investors would have in terms of kind of unfavorable changes in taxation in the future.
Nikolai, we're closing the end of our interview, but I still have a couple of more questions, please. What's the overall investment of Amundi here at Bucharest Stock Exchange in your portfolios, if you have a number?
I don't have a number, but again, as I mentioned, it's clearly not the core part of the portfolio, but we have some exposure just to enhance our results.
And in the next 5 years, let's say, what weight could Romania have in your portfolios? Do you think it could double?
If we talk about kind of a CE funds, then I would say that, again, if all goes well in terms of fiscal and political stability, if there would be more stocks and more liquidity in Bucharest Stock Exchange, I would say that yes, in CE funds, the share of Romanian assets might be mid to high single digit.
I've read the interview in Financial Times about Valery Botșon, the CEO of Amundi, saying that this, let's say, the situation with the US, it will make Amundi cut exposure to US over the coming year. Do you think that by doing this, we will have a much bigger flows in Eastern Europe?
It is possible, as I mentioned, diversification away from US into Europe and emerging market is ongoing. And emerging Europe is an important part of the universe.
Okay, oh, that's very optimistic. Nikolai, any closing remarks from your side?
Oh, thanks for inviting me here, and all the best.
Thank you. All the same to you, Nikolai. Nikolai Petrov was with us today, Portfolio Manager, Emerging Markets Equity at Amundi. Thank you very much, Nikolai, for your time, for your explanations, and for your optimism regarding Romania. And I hope to see you again soon, when we will have another 50% in the market. And if we are to maintain this trajectory that we've been at the start of the year, we should see ourselves soon enough. Thank you again, Nikolai.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now switch to Romanian for the closing remarks. Mulțumim tare mult că ne-ați urmărit. Fie întins la investiții câștigătoare. Numai bine!